Before Ozzy Osbourne adopted the nickname the Prince of Darkness.
Well, maybe you're the one who's been riding a crazy train, but I've been the Prince of Darkness since 1979.
Before biting the head off a bat during a live performance. Before redefining the meaning of a dysfunctional family in the early 2000s. Ozzy Osbourne, he rose to prominence in the music scene during the 1970s as the lead vocalist of the heavy metal band Black Sabbath. But by 1979, Ozzy, he found himself on the outside of the band, looking in due to severe drug and alcohol problems. Now Ozzy, he battled through those demons and put together a hugely successful solo career, releasing 11 studio albums, the first 7 of which all went multi-platinum in the US, with a total album sales of his work grossing over $100 million. Now it should come as no surprise that this native of Birmingham, with his unmistakable Brummie accent, well, he's affectionately known as the godfather of heavy metal. What's going on, guys? It's your boy Michael McCrudden taking a look at a video that I've meant to make for a very, very long time now. Now this band, he's been making music for much longer than I've even been alive. And yeah, I'm starting to feel old, so you can imagine how old he must feel. Now I want to do more videos like this on legends from the world of Hollywood and entertainment, but for that to happen, I need you guys to keep your suggestions coming in. Hit me up in the DMs or in the comments down below. Now pull up a chair, grab the nearest dove or bat or anything that's a flying rodent, and let's get our rock on. Here we go with Ozzy Osbourne, Before They Were Famous. Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell. Boom! Ozzy Osbourne was born John Michael Osbourne on December 3rd, 1948. Now to put that into perspective for some of us, that's only 3 years after the end of World War II. What's World War II, you ask? Well, I guess that's a whole entirely different video. Ozzy Osbourne was born in the Aston area of Birmingham, England. Now his mother Lillian, she was a non-observant Catholic who worked at a local factory. His father John Thomas Osbourne, he worked night shifts as a toolmaker for General Electric. Now Osbourne had 3 older sisters growing up, Jean, Iris, and Gillian. He also had 2 younger brothers, Paul and Tony. Now this large family, they lived in a small 2-bedroom home at 14 Lodge Road in Aston. Now apparently kids at school, they took to calling him Ozzy as an insult. But Osbourne, he just picked it up and he ran with it. And he embraced the name that one day would be known the world over. But name calling wasn't the worst that would happen to this young dyslexic bevster. At age 11, Ozzy, he was reportedly molested and sexually exploited by a pair of bullies that would terrorize him every day after school. And while Ozzy, he has stated that these assaults, they stopped short of rape, well, they nonetheless greatly affected his development at a very precarious age. Now, Ozzy's main form of release was the enjoyment he experienced by performing on stage. In school, he took part in plays such as The Mikado and HMS Pinafore. Now, his other means of escape was popular music. Now, upon hearing She Loves You by the Beatles at the age of 14, well, Ozzy, he quickly became a huge fan of their work and was inspired to become a musician. In the 2011 documentary, God Bless Ozzy Osbourne, well, he said about that moment, "I knew I was going to be a rock star the rest of my life." Now Ozzy, he left school at the age of 15 and he went through a series of different jobs. He was a construction worker, a plumber, a toolmaker, a car factory horn tuner, and he even worked at a slaughterhouse. Now when those gigs, they didn't pan out, well Ozzy, he tried less notable ways to get by. Now he attempted to commit burglary by stealing a television which fell on him during his getaway, and well, it had to be abandoned. Now he did manage to escape with some old shirts and some baby clothes, which he mistakenly grabbed in the confusion. Now he spent 6 weeks in Winson Green Prison where he was unable to pay the fine after being convicted for the theft. Now in 1967, Ozzy, he began to finally get his music career off the ground. Now that year, he teamed up with Geezer Butler to form his first band, Rare Breed. Now the band, they played 2 shows and then they broke up. But Ozzy and Butler, well, they would then team up with guitarist Tony Lamy and drummer Bill Ward under the name Polka Tulk Blues. Now that name, it lasted a very short period of time before they rebranded themselves as Earth. But after being accidentally booked for a show instead of a different band with the same name, well, the 4 men, they decided to change their name once again. Taking note of how people enjoyed to be frightened, well, the band, they decided to lead into a heavy blues style of music laced with gloomy sounds and dark lyrics. With that in mind, they settled on the moniker Black Sabbath in August of 1969, and this was after the horror film of the same name.
This is Black Sabbath.
While recording their first record, Butler, he read an occult book and he woke up later that night to see a dark figure standing at the end of his bed. Now, after telling Ozzy about the experience, well, the two men, they sat down and they wrote the lyrics to Black Sabbath, the first song to take on this darker tone. Built around Lami's guitar riffs, Butler's lyrics, Ward's dark tempo drums, and Ozzy's eerie, off-kilter vocals, well, the band's initial album, Black Sabbath, and Paranoid, well, they sold to huge numbers and would see lengthy play on the radio despite only a modest investment from their US record label, Warner Brothers. In fact, Osbourne's one lament about starting off was this. In those days, the band wasn't very popular with the women, but that wasn't to be an issue for Ozzy for much longer. It was around 1971 when Ozzy, he would meet his future wife, Sharon Arden. Now, this was after a surprise success of their first album. Well, Black Sabbath, they were considering hiring her father, Don Arden, as their new manager. Now, Sharon, she was acting as Don's receptionist, and Ozzy admits to being attracted to her immediately, but he assumed that she would probably think that he was some kind of lunatic. Despite the fact that the relationship was strictly professional at this point, well, Ozzy has always stated that the best thing about choosing Don as their manager was getting to see Sharon on the regular. But things, they were meant to be for those two right off the bat. No pun intended. First, Ozzy, he married another woman named Thelma Riley, whom he met at a nightclub in Birmingham called the Rum Runner, and that's, well, where that girl works. The two married soon after, and they had two children, Jessica and Lewis, and Ozzy, he also adopted Thelma's son, Elliot. Now, Ozzy would later refer to this marriage as a terrible mistake. His substance abuse issues, coupled with his frequent absence while touring, took a toll on his family. In God Bless Ozzy Osbourne, Ozzy even admitted that he doesn't remember when Jessica or Lewis were born. It was in 1971 when Ozzy tried cocaine for the first time at a hotel in Denver, Colorado. Now, apparently, Mountain's guitarist Leslie West, well, that's who first introduced him to the drug. Now, West is understandably reluctant to take ownership for this story, but Ozzy, he remembers the experience quite vividly. He stated, "When you come from Aston and you fall in love with cocaine, you remember when you started. It's like having your first." Ozzy states that upon trying the drug for the first time, well, the world, it went fuzzy after. Back in his professional life, Black Sabbath's next albums were Master of Reality and Volume 4, and both did great numbers despite receiving critical backlash. Now, at the time of release, Lester Bangs of Rolling Stone dismissed Masters of Reality as naive, simplistic, repetitive, and absolute dogger. I didn't know that was a word. Now, less than 30 years later, on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list, well, Master of Reality, it punched in at number 298. So take that, Lester Bangs. In November of 1973, critics jumped on Black Sabbath's bandwagon after the release of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. Now, this release, it marked the 5th consecutive platinum-selling album for the band in the United States. By 1978, the band had released Sabotage and Technical Ecstasy, but Ozzy, he was getting restless. Now, that year, he left the band for 3 months to pursue a solo project entitled Blizzard of Oz. Now, 3 former members of Earth, they backed Ozzy in the studio and briefly became the first incarnation of this solo act. Nonplussed by this activity, the other members of Sabbath, well, they requested that Ozzy rejoin the band, which, well, he eventually did. Now, the band, they then spent 5 months in Toronto, Ontario, writing and recording what would become Never Say Die, the last album Ozzy would record with Black Sabbath until 2013. Now, Lamy recalls the following about that time in the band's life. "It took quite a long time. We were getting really drugged out, doing a lot of dope. We'd go down to the sessions and we'd have to pack up because we're too stoned. We'd have to stop. Nobody could get anything right. We were all over the place. Everybody's playing a different thing. We'd go back and sleep it off and try again the next day." For his part, well, Ozzy, he recalls the following about his drug and alcohol issues around this time. "I get high, I get effed up. What the hell's wrong with getting effed up? There must be something wrong with the system if so many people have to get effed up. I never take dope or anything before I go on stage. I'll smoke a joint or whatever afterwards." Slowly but surely, things began to fall apart for the group. Their 1978 Never Say Die tour, it received negative reviews. There were new acts like Van Halen that were touring worldwide for the first time, and the band hit the studio, and there they were uninspired. Now, on top of this, tension and conflict had arisen. Now Ozzy, he was asked repeatedly to record and re-record his vocals, and the sound of which was being manipulated endlessly by Lammy. Now the situation, it caused a tear in the band, and Ozzy, he was fired on April 27, 1979. Now the reason given to him was that he was unreliable and had excessive substance abuse issues compared to the other members of the band. Now despite that accusation, Ozzy has always claimed that his drug and alcohol use at the time was neither better nor worse than any other members of the band. Now Ozzy recalls the following about leaving Sabbath. "I'd got 96,000 pounds for my share of the name, so I just locked myself away and spent 3 months doing coke and booze. My thinking was, this is my last party, because after this, I'm going back to Birmingham and the dole." However, a last-second life preserver showed up at his front door. Now Don Arden, he signed him to Jet Records and dispatched his daughter Sharon to Los Angeles to look after Ozzy and to protect her father's investment. Now originally Arden, she had hoped to convince Ozzy to return to Sabbath, but later on when it became clear that that wasn't going to happen anytime soon, he tried to convince the singer to name his new band Son of Sabbath. But Ozzy, he hated this idea. By late 1979, Osbourne finally formed the Blizzard of Oz with a series of other talented musicians. But by the time the debut album of the group was released, the music was wholly credited to Ozzy, with the title of the album instead taking on the former name of the band, thus commencing Ozzy's solo career. Now Blizzard of Oz would go on to become one of the few albums amongst the 100 bestsellers of the 1980s to achieve multi-platinum status without the benefit of a top 40 single, and even his former band members, they were taking note. With Bill Ward, Sabbath's drummer, stating, "He seemed to be coming around from whatever it was that he'd gone through, and he seemed to be on his way again, making records and stuff. I envied it because I wanted that. I was bitter, and I had a thoroughly miserable time." After signing his first solo record deal with CBS Records in 1981, Ozzy, he bit the head off a dove during a meeting with the executives from the label. Now he had planned to release the dove into the air as a sign of peace, but due to being intoxicated at the time, he bit the head off the dove instead. I don't know how you messed that up. Less than a year later, Ozzy, he would go for an encore, biting the head off a bat while performing on stage in Iowa. Yeah. Now, no one can quite recall if the bat was already dead or alive, but the event nonetheless lived on in infamy and was named number 2 on Rolling Stone magazine's Rock's Wildest Myths list. Damn, what was number 1? Probably something to do with Marilyn Manson and them ribs. Now in February of 1982, while wearing one of Sharon's dresses for a photo shoot near the Alamo, Ozzy, he drunkenly urinated on a monument erected in honor of those who died at the famous Last Stand in Texas. Now, a police officer arrested Ozzy and he was subsequently banned from San Antonio for a decade. Now, Ozzy's second album, Diary of a Madman, it was known for its singles Over the Mountain and Flying High Again. And Ozzy, he has since stated that this is his personal favorite album of all of his work. Now, on March 19th of 1982, while touring in support of Diary of a Madman, a light aircraft carrying pilot Andrew Aycock and 2 members of Ozzy's band, guitarist Randy Rhoads, and costume and makeup designer Rachel Youngblood, it crashed while performing low passes over the band's tour bus. The left wing of the aircraft, it clipped the bus, causing the plane to brush against a tree and crash into a garage of a nearby mansion, killing everyone on board. Now, experiencing firsthand the horrific death of his close friends and co-workers, Ozzy, he fell into a deep depression. Now, despite the tragedy, a ray of light entered his life when he and Sharon were married on July 4th of 1982. Now, the two, they would go on to have 3 children, Ami, Kelly, and Jack. And apparently the couple, they picked the 4th of July for their wedding, so that Ozzy, he'd never forget their anniversary. Now in 1986, Ozzy, he released another album entitled The Ultimate Sin, which at the time of its release was his highest charting studio album ever. It went double platinum by 1994, but Ozzy, he was still dealing with chemical dependency issues. It was around this time that he announced that he was going to do his short-lived retirement tour, and it was called No More Tours, a pun on his most recent album, No More Tears. Now, after returning from the Moscow Music Peace Festival in August of 1989, Ozzy was once more arrested, this time for attempted murder after he had tried to strangle Sharon while under the influence of alcohol and drugs. He then spent 6 months in a rehab clinic, after which, well, Sharon, she said she regained her strength in the relationship and she didn't press any charges against her husband. God bless that woman.
I was arrested for attempted murder of Sharon. I had no idea. I didn't know what they were talking about.
Can we just stop there? Attempted murder of your wife.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Ozzy's entire CD catalog was then remastered and reissued in 1995, just before he dropped a brand new album entitled Osmosis, and he returned to touring, playing up his prior retirement with the Retirement Sucks tour. Despite all the success he found with his music, Ozzy's biggest financial success of the 90s, it was actually a musical festival called Ozzfest, created and managed by Sharon and assisted by his son Jack. Now, since its inception, over 5 million people have attended Ozzfest, and the event has grossed over $100 million. Now, Ozzfest has also helped Ozzy become the first hard rock and heavy metal star to hit $500 million in merchandise sales. Next up was Down to Earth, which was Ozzy's first album of new studio material in over 6 years, and when it was released in 2001, the album, it had a hit single, Dreamers, which peaked at number 10 on Billboard's mainstream rock tracks. Now, despite having unquestionable success as a musician, Ozzy's greatest claim to fame is perhaps his reality television show. Yeah, The Osbournes. Now, this debuted on MTV in March of 2002. The series featured unfettered access to Ozzy's domestic life and co-starred his wife Sharon, as well as his children Kelly and Jack. Now, the show, it instantly became a massive hit, finding its mark in the zeitgeist of the times of the dawn of reality television. It led to further professional opportunities for the entire family, including hosting the annual American Music Awards, as well as the 2008 Brit Awards. Yeah, they were everywhere. It was a massive part of pop culture. Ozzy, he popped up in video games like World of Warcraft and Guitar Hero World Tour. Literally, absolutely everywhere. Now, in more recent years, Ozzy, he announced that he would once more embark on his final world tour, which was dubbed No More Tours 2. Despite the seeming finality of the venture, Ozzy has stressed that he's not retiring. In fact, he stated, "It's no more tours, so I'm just not doing world tours anymore. I'm still going to be doing gigs, but I'm not going to tour for 6 months at a time anymore. I'd like to spend some time at home." More recently, Ozzy, he was rushed to hospital in February of 2019 due to complications stemming from the flu, which doctors feared was turning into pneumonia. About a week later, he was moved into intensive care, and then soon after, he was released. Now, he canceled the rest of his No More Tours 2 dates after falling in his home and suffering further injuries. Now, that same month, he was also diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, but he would not publicly reveal this diagnosis until January of 2020. Now, on September 6th of 2019, Ozzy, he was featured on the song Take What You Want by Post Malone. Now, the song would peak at number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100, making it Ozzy's first US top 10 single in 30 years. So, the guy's really still got a lot to give this world. Then in February of 2020, Ozzy, he plans on releasing his 12th studio album, Ordinary Man. Yeah, and this is gonna have appearances from Post Malone, Travis Scott, and Elton John. So, where it goes now from Ozzy is anyone's guess. Maybe the guy's still got some bats and some doves to chew on just to give us one last bang. Anyways, guys, I enjoyed making these videos on the legends, the people that I grew up with, the people that really changed the world for an entire century. Ozzy Osbourne's definitely one of them. You guys gotta let me know who's next in the comments down below. It's your boy Michael McCrudden. I'm just back from holidays. So I look forward to reading all your comments, and I'll see you guys in another video.
That's all right for a kid from Birmingham.
It's all right for a little guy from 14 Miles Road, Aston.
You're doing all right, Ozzy.
Yeah. From one Aussie to another Aussie.